All right, joining me today is Jonathan Micallef, who fights Oban Elliot at UFC Perth. That fight is on September 27th. So, Jonathan, I want to start by talking about your UFC debut because, you come off the Contender Series, you come in as a pretty big underdog against Kevin Jousset, and you put an absolute striking clinic on him, right? Like, you drop him once, you have an absolute day on your feet. Tell me a little bit about the feeling you had following that win.
Yeah, it was really good for myself. I think that it just sort of really solidified where I'm at in the game. You know, Kevin's a big name. He was someone who had been really highly touted, and I think that I believed in myself, and I knew that I had what it took. But it was sort of just about showing it to everyone else, you know, and just showing that I am of that level, and then I'm right there with some of the best welterweights to do it.
And so then I gotta ask you too, because like I just said, you dominated on the feet. You dropped them. You looked excellent in your striking. But like in the past, your grappling game has gotten going. You've had the submissions, and you were going up against a guy who was a striker. So was it part of the game plan to keep this on the feet with the guy who prefers to strike?
Yeah, it actually was. Well, I know that I'm very well touted in every area of the MMA, and oops, sorry. Yeah, sorry, I lost you for a second there. And I just sort of wanted to show that I could do it, you know. And I think that if the grapple did present itself, I would have dominated there too. But it hadn't happened, so yeah. But I think that there's a lot of parts of my game that I'm still yet to show that I'm very very well rounded in, and I hope that this upcoming fight will be somewhere I can show all that.
We're gonna get to that fight in just a second, but before we do, I gotta ask you too. You have this big win. You're an underdog. It's like a great moment, and now we've kind of had a little bit of time away from the cage. It's been almost 8 months since we've seen you in there. Has it been frustrating? Was that by design? Like, what sort of is the thought process behind that big layoff?
Yeah. Well, that's probably the biggest layoff that I've had my entire career, including when I got married, and that's not by choice. I have been ready. I've been training. I've been sort of just waiting for the call up, but unfortunately, it never came. But it didn't come early enough. But it's here now, so not by design, not by choice. I've been pretty much in camp, um, ready to go at any point, but just waiting for the call up.
Well, and so I've talked to other fighters before too about like that long layoff and like being in camp for that long and honing things for that long. And, on some hand, some people are like, it's a pain in the ass. I'm trying to figure out how to peak the right way and worried that I'm going to get called for a late second call. And then other people say like it's the only time I've ever been able to like really work on myself. So where do you sort of fall in that spectrum? Do you feel like, it's a bonus that you've finally been able to like work on some things that you've never been able to, or are you kind of pissed that you haven't been in there yet?
Yeah, well, the beauty of it is that I'm young, so the whole peaking thing. I mean, of course, you want to have time to peak at the right time, but for me, that hasn't really been much of an issue. But definitely has allowed me to get a whole lot better at in my game and just developing in all those areas. I'm still so young. I'm only 26, so like I've had the ability to grind and to keep working, and I don't like I am still young, but there's no point waiting around. You know what I mean? Like the losing time, it just constantly ticking. So for me, I'm just constantly trying to get better as a martial artist, and I think that the longer time that there is in between fights, the better I'm going to be. So although it's frustrating for myself because obviously financially fighting's my full time thing, and it's where how I put food on the table. But at the same time, it's going to get me better, and it's gonna show a lot more every time I do get in there.
And obviously, we've got to talk about your most recent training because I see on Instagram you arm in arm with Robert Whittaker pretty much all the time. So,
So,
being able to train with a legend, being able to get prepared for, every fight is your biggest fight, right? At this stage of your career, the next one is always the biggest one. So being able to get ready for the biggest one beside, maybe one of the best middleweights ever to do it, what has that been like for you to be able to be near him and get prepared with him?
yeah, I was going to mention that earlier. The long layoff, that was sort of the massive benefit that I was able to get in there. Like moving around with Rob and just taking him, pretty much taking me under his wing and showing me things and techniques, and just working with guys that are bigger than you and also much better was just like invaluable for me, especially in the grappling area. I think like Rob does a lot of good stuff, but I think that his grappling is really like understated. You know, it doesn't get the respect it deserves. You've seen him going up against UL, and just little things that I've learned and reactions and stuff like that that can sort of become second nature, and that I was able to get from working with him for those weeks. So it was about 6 weeks that I was working with him, and has helped me develop immensely. Really, really big.
Well, that's awesome to hear. Now, obviously, I want to talk about the fight. I want to talk more about your preparation for it, but I gotta ask because I'm a fan. I'm a fan of fighters, but I'm also a fan of fight nicknames. It's one of my favorite things in the whole world. So I see the captain listed on Tapology as your nickname. Tell me a little bit. How did you become the captain?
Yeah, well, I sort of that one just sort of came about based on how I sort of hang around the gym, and I'm always there for the guys coming up, and I'm like a leader. You know, I'm the guy out of Combat One that is the leader, the captain. I'm leading the way for all those guys, and I'm sort of just setting a precedent for all the guys coming up of how you should approach camp, how you should approach your life outside of fighting, and all these sort of things. It's like, you know, I've become quite a figure for the younger fighters coming up that I look up to, and you know, I really pride myself in that.
I love that. And so like I've also seen you obviously in a whole bunch of their corners in terms of regional fights and stuff like that too. You know, and you're young yourself, you mentioned. You're not like an old guy to be doing that. You know, you're not already thinking about life outside of the cage, but is like coaching and the idea of coaching something that's always sort of you've been drawn to?
No, not necessarily. No, I think that just my passion for the sport. It's just like something that keeps me around it. You know, if I'm not training and fighting myself, then I'm there helping other people fight and train, and there's value in that for myself. You know, so like although you like we said earlier, I've been away for 8 months, but in that 8 months, I've been coaching and training and, you know, really delving into in MMA, which helps me in many ways. So yeah, I do, but I do think yeah, later on down the track, there would probably be coaching or something of the sort, for sure.
I love that. I love that. Now let's talk about this fight because it is an exciting one. UFC Perth, you get Oban Elliot. That's the name they come to you. They phone you in with it. When you first hear that that's who they want you to fight, you know, obviously a guy coming off of a loss, but a guy who's highly touted. What were sort of your first thoughts on that being the opponent they wanted you to go down with?
Yeah, I was a super exciting fight for me, man. Like Oban Elliot, he's good everywhere. So my first impression was, let's do it. You know what I mean? Get pre-fight goosebumps and you get ready to go. He is someone that I have sort of kept an eye on for a little bit. You know, in those Tapology rankings, I've sort of looked between those, you know, 20 to 40 ranked fighters, and he's definitely one that I thought I would get matched with at some point. Yeah, I think it's an awesome matchup for me, and another guy who's quite experienced and he's on a winning record in UFC that will bring out the best of me and will really put me up in the spotlight once I get the win.
And so I got to ask you too, because we just mentioned it a little bit earlier on in the interview about being the underdog against Kevin Jousset. You're the underdog again. You know, coming off of a big win as an underdog, you're an underdog again against a guy who, like I said, you know, it's kind of got a name behind him, but it's coming off of a loss. What are sort of your thoughts on the way that the public perceives you in terms of your abilities?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I still haven't shown all of my game. So for them, I don't blame them. You know, how will they know any better? They've just seen little snippets of what I can do. In the grappling, especially like my contender series fight, I didn't really show that much. You know, that was quite tied up, and then I got a triangle, and that was the end of the match. And even in my most recent fight, there was a hell of a lot that I think that I did wrong there. So for the public to have me as the underdog against Oban, who's been able to show a lot of these facets of his game, completely understand that, and I love it, mate. I love being the underdog. Honestly, it's all I've ever been coming up. Even through the regional scene, everyone always saw me as I was always the underdog, and that's sort of like how it's been, and I love it, mate. I really do.
I love it as well. Now, give me a little bit of the stylistic breakdown of this fight, because as you mentioned, there's pieces of your game we haven't necessarily seen. I don't want you to give those away, but give us a little bit of a taste of like what we're gonna see come, September 27th.
Well, you've got a guy like Oban Elliot. He likes to switch stance. He can kick on both sides. He doesn't necessarily look for the grapple, but the clinch happens quite often. Um, so you can expect a little bit of grappling there, I'd assume. And a guy who usually likes to skirt the outside of octagon. He likes to just sort of stay on the outside, counter strike from there, and then let his hands go. I think he's very good at setting traps. So I think that this would be quite a fun stylistic stand up match that will potentially go to the ground. But mate, MMA is so chaotic. Who knows what will happen? But I expect it to be a stand up fest for everyone.
Well, you just said you can't really expect anything and we can't make a prediction, but here I am. I love to end my interviews with a prediction. So I'm going to ask you anyway, how do you see this one ending come September 27th?
Ooh, a second round DAS.
Ooh, second round darts. All right, well, you heard it here first, folks. This has been Jonathan Micallef, who fights Oban Elliot, UFC Perth. Once again, that fight, September 27th. Jonathan, thank you so much for the time, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. My pleasure.